right, welcome everyone. I see we have some people joining us today. Welcome, thank you for joining. We're going to give everybody just a few minutes to come into the event. We'll start about 3 minutes after 11. This is 11 Eastern. And I'll go ahead and ask the audience, where is everybody located today? Where are you people around the world? Feel free to enter in the Q&A box on the event console. Where is everybody? If we get some.
I'm going to guess we at least have one person from Kansas. Just a guess.
London, Reston, Virginia, the Netherlands, Dallas, Boston, Germany, Switzerland.
All right.
Toronto, all around the world. This is awesome, the global event.
Where are you at, Reed?
I am in sunny Atlanta, Georgia. I believe it was 75 degrees yesterday. And I'm sure that's going to make some people jealous on the call. It was a beautiful day in Atlanta yesterday. Bill,
That's
where are you located?
That's Fahrenheit, by the way, for everybody outside the U.S. I'm in downtown Brooklyn, New York City, and it's going up to 60 or 65 today, which is pretty good considering it was 25 Fahrenheit on Monday.
Wow.
What a swing.
So you said downtown Brooklyn. Is there an uptown in Brooklyn?
Brooklyn's actually pretty large. I think it would be the third or fourth largest city in the country by itself. I can't remember exactly. So downtown's the part that's right across the harbor from Manhattan.
And I know you would know, Bill, you've been in Brooklyn a long time, right?
Half my life, since the 80s.
I have never been to Brooklyn.
You're killing me here.
Are we going to change once we get back to traveling, Bill? See, I'm trying to say not when we get back to normal because everyone's so tired of hearing that. We've got to get Reed to visit you in Brooklyn.
Absolutely. As soon as all the restaurants open back up.
So where is the New World Trade Center in reference to Brooklyn? That's not Brooklyn, is it?
No, it's right across the harbor in downtown Manhattan. So there's downtown Manhattan and then the Statue of Liberty, then downtown Brooklyn.
That's where I've been. I've been to Manhattan. Is that called Uptown?
We've got to get you out of the South. Now, there's nothing wrong with the South, just to be clear. And I live in the South too. For those of you out there, I'm based in Atlanta. I just grew up in the Northeast. But we've got to get you north there, Reed.
I will gladly go. Looking forward to it.
Thanks.
All right, guys. We are 3 minutes after 11 Eastern, so let's go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world today. Obviously, all over the world from when we first joined. So welcome to today's event. My name is Reed Gusmus, and I'm the VP of Marketing at Profisee. Some exciting content we have to discuss today, and we thank you all for taking the time out of your busy day to join us. As a quick reminder, this event is being recorded, so everyone who either registered or who will be attending today, you're going to get the on-demand recording after the event, so be looking for that in your inbox. For those of you who have never heard of Profisee, Profisee is an industry leader in master data management solutions, and we provide organizations a fast, affordable, scalable, multi-domain solution to deliver trusted data across the enterprise. Today, we have two special guests with us. First, I'll introduce Mr. Len Finkle. Len is the CEO of Profisee with over 25 years of experience in the software sector, working for companies like MIA Systems, Dun & Bradstreet, PeopleSoft, and SAP. During his 10-year tenure at SAP, he was the Senior Vice President of Business Analytics and Technology, which covered the scope of analytics, enterprise information management, and of course, master data management. The second gentleman on the line today is Mr. Bill O'Kane. Bill is the Vice President and MDM Strategist at Profisee. Bill has over 20 years of experience across data governance and master data management. And before Bill joined Profisee, he spent 8 years as Vice President of Data and Analytics at Gartner, leading the Magic Quadrant report for master data management solutions, and was responsible for the global coverage of data governance and master data management. Why don't we just jump right into discussion today with Len and Bill. Today's discussion is titled MDM in 2021. Be careful out there. You all may or may not know that the long-awaited 2021 Gartner Master Data Management Magic Quadrant report was delivered in January of this year, and part of that research reveals some really interesting trends about the market today to look out for those trends to be exact. And so that's what we're going to discuss today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the microphone to Len and Bill, and let's take the discussion forward. Go ahead, Len.
Thank you so much, Reed. Bill, thanks for joining this conversation with me today. It's an honor to share the microphone with you. Most importantly, thank you to all the people that have joined us here via video. We know that there's many things that you could be doing today and on your calendar, and you certainly have plenty of video invites out there. So the fact that you're investing time with us today is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. So Bill, looking at the Gartner report, they always talk about growth. One of the things that they mention or cite is modest growth in the MDM market and kind of the rise of the underdog. What's your take on that? Why the modest growth?
So there's a couple of things going on here. Thanks, Len, and it's a pleasure to be with you today, and everybody else as well. Numbers can be a dry discussion. We certainly have a lot of them ourselves, but there's a story back here that's interesting, and it's continuing. I started at Gartner in 2011, and this trend was already just beginning. I was involved earlier in my career with a couple of pretty large implementations that became MDM software products. That really weren't called MDM back then, but they were very expensive. When they were finally productized, some of the sticker prices were $10 and $15 million. And for a perpetual license, so you can on the maintenance on something like that, right? As a former sales guy, looking good. That went on for a long time, and starting in 2011 to 12, it was just kind of starting to erode. So what Gartner did, and this is the only time I'll mention other vendors' names in here. Oddly, we don't really end up competing with them because of this trend, more than likely. So they say that the calendar year 2019 increase over calendar year 2018 in overall revenue was only 1.7%, says Gartner. But then they take the step of removing IBM and Oracle and giving the net of that to going up to 5.6%. So what that's really saying is, that historical chunk of maintenance and even perpetual licenses is still affecting sort of the growth rates and everything else, even though there are vendors out there that particularly in the case of one or both of those, and maybe even others, that aren't really pushing MDM anymore, but they're still making money from it, right? So again, I believe that's why Gartner took the step of removing them from the equation, saying, look, if you take them out, it's 5.6% of the smaller, the smaller guys are really churning it out. The other part of that is, as Reed mentioned, the affordable part of Profisee. The smaller guys, and Profisee in particular, is great about this. We're affordable. We don't go in there to charge millions and millions and millions of dollars. Nobody would pay that anymore. And again, that's why the mega vendors largely are sort of out of the picture from that standpoint, because they can't really recoup money at that rate anymore from this stuff. The last thing I'm going to point out is these are actually pre-COVID numbers, calendar year 2019 over 2018. Elsewhere in that document, Gartner points out that for the last 10 months of 2020, they had a year-over-year growth rate in what they call inquiries, which are interactions initiated by their clients for advice, of 28%. So while there was a modest increase in revenue from 18 to 19, the activity rate for them, which is a very, very good leading indicator, I can tell you from experience, went up 28% in 2020 over 2019. So I'm really optimistic, and that kind of lines up with the kind of year we had in 2020, which was obviously very busy and very good for all of us. So I'm looking forward to much different numbers next year, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what else is interesting, Bill, is listening you talk about it. There's this big focus on revenue, but with more modern architecture, master data management software being much more affordable to buy and implement, I would be willing to bet that the industry actually grew. If you look at quantities, for example, right? When we talk about inquiries, we look at quantities. I'd be willing to bet that actually a lot more people implemented MDM than in past years. But when you just look at it from a revenue perspective, since the average selling cost is now down, the typical cost to implement is down, it could be very likely that there were a lot more MDM implementations. Would you say that's accurate?
I would. And, it's difficult. I don't think Gartner tracks it. We were never able to. And we used to get this question all the time, what's the success rate? With the denominator of purchases, who actually goes live? And it was very, very hard to track, if not impossible. But I would guess that success rate has gone up and will continue to go up. We'll talk about, implementation costs in a minute, but, and that still being there. But even given that, the penetration rate is still pretty modest, but I think the success rate is actually maybe a bit better than the penetration rate.
And I'll tell you what, and we all know how critical that success rate is. And I do look forward to talking more about that as well later in our conversation. So when we talk about the differences in revenues year over year, which a lot of people like to compare, which makes sense, obviously one of the other trends, it's no surprise, is subscription pricing, right? It's becoming so popular, that's clearly lowering the initial cost barriers. And when you do that year over year comparison, it becomes more difficult. Matter of fact, Gartner cites that the subscription revenue grew by well over 20% last year, which is interesting. How do you see this shift towards subscription pricing in general having an effect on the MDM market specifically?
It's a good question, and just like the previous question, there are kind of shades to it. One is, yes, it lowers the barrier to entry, obviously, and it affects. We can speak as vendors. We have to manage the revenue profiles very carefully. Everybody does it that's in the market that wants to do this, and I can say for us, it's going very well. But there's this idea of the barrier for entry being lowered, and I'm happy to say that the vendor I work for has always had an affordable fence to step over into entry. So we've always kind of been there, even at the perpetual level. But market-wide, going to subscription, it does lower the barrier to entry, but I think it's got a deceptive side to it, right? So if you understand that you're taking software off the table and making the entry to only that a little more easy, but you're not really taking care of everything else and making that easier, that's still going to be the same. The organizational, the political, the technical, let's be honest, you have to integrate the technical difficulties and all of that are still going to be there. So what becomes more important, you can take for granted that you're going to get subscription level pricing that you can deal with. You'll be able to use operating expense to pay for it instead of capital expense, which a few years ago we did a survey at Gartner, I think, where it turned out that, I don't know if this is still true, but the main reason people wanted to go to cloud was so they could pay with OpEx. They didn't even really care where it was. They just wanted to pay with OpEx. So they wanted subscription pricing, and they had this connection in their minds that it had to be cloud if they were going to get subscription. So that I think is no longer the case, but the mentality I think is still there of how I'm going to pay for this. But again, to go back to sort of the don't be fooled discussion of, you can buy the software more easily. And I'm a little bit of sometimes a realist or a pessimist that says that we talked about the success rate a couple of minutes ago. This could actually work against it, because people acquiring software that really never got the understanding of what the rest of the barriers were to entry, besides the cost of the software, right? So the implementation costs, the infrastructure costs, the integration costs, all of that, it becomes more important than ever that you get with a vendor partner that really helps you with the rest of it, not just charging you a modest or affordable amount for the software, which we've been doing forever, happily Profisee, and one of the reasons I came to work for Profisee was that we understand the rest of it and we support the rest of it fully, from building a business case right out to just very, very good professional services and a partner network to go along with that. So again, the main message I'd like to get across here is, yes, it'll be easier to buy the software, but don't make the mistake of translating that into all the other aspects of implementing MDM.
No,
I'm sure you concur with that.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point, because at the end of the day, it is about value. And one of the other trends that were discussed in the Magic Quadrant report was about a faster time to value.
Right.
So now talking about not just value in general, but time to value. We're all in agreement we've got to get the value. They talked about clients and prospects from their perspective being willing to give up some overall value for speed of delivery. That was kind of one of the themes they discussed. And I was curious about your take on that.
It really bothered me, honestly. That's one of the things that bothered me the most of the findings that they got. And again, just to toot Profisee's horn a little bit, but this, everyone could do this. I don't think anyone does it as well as we do, obviously. But this idea of building a business impact roadmap that not only has the business case, but the actual technical milestones in place that it would take to achieve it, and how to verify and measure that. Short answer, which I'll jump to and then back up a little bit, is I've been here over 18 months and I have yet to ask any client or prospect to give up initial value for speed. I just haven't. You may have, but I work pretty closely with our value consulting team, and it bothers me that anyone seeking to implement MDM would take for granted that they must give up some value for speed. I just haven't found that to be the case. Now, when we say value, we should, I guess, be clear. We mean initial value, the first big milestone that's going to deliver something that the business can see and build up political capital to keep moving forward. And we had historically the highest number of sub 3-month delivery of initial value, according to Gartner. So again, we've been doing this for a long time. Profisee's been doing it before I got here. But again, I really am bothered by the idea that somebody would take for granted that, I need to get something going fast, but I can't do anything that's going to be really meaningful. I'm just going to do some little thing that nobody can see and just to show that it works. I think that's just as dangerous maybe as not doing a business case, because again, you need that visible thing where everybody says, oh, that's what this does. Oh, but gosh, let me give you a list. Because now that I get it, now that I see the stewardship and the data quality and the data integration all in one place, I got a lot of ideas. Now that I know what this looks like as a business person, I have questions. And that's usually where the good stuff really starts. And you want that to happen before the implementation even, right? And that's why we have our whole process around that. So that's the main point I would like to say is I'm kind of bothered by it because I don't think that's necessary. Do you agree with me?
I agree completely, Bill. When you've got to show value in any investment a business makes, because there's so many different things that we as business people can invest in, and to think that, okay, I'm going to say, well, I don't need as much value because I'm going to do something fast, just doesn't really resonate with me. At this point, you've got to be able to do both. I still remember I had and you may or may not, for anyone out there, love Jack Welch, but I did get the opportunity to meet him, and I was asking him about short-term versus long-term, because there's all this on Wall Street. It's been around for years. Do public corporations sacrifice long-term to get quarterly results? And what he said to me was, Len, he said, listen, plenty of companies can get just short-term success. Many companies can get long-term success. The great companies do both, and that's what you have to do. And this is similar. You've got to be able to show value quickly, but it can't be one or the other. And I think that's one of the reasons why other vendors like us have been more successful in this space, because we're able to provide value quickly. But you mentioned the roadmap, because one of the things that I think is super important is you've got to be able to have that stepping stone where even if you implement something in a short period of time, that you're able to take the next steps. You mentioned, doing a roadmap, whether it's BIR, which I was very impressed that Gartner pointed out, because I haven't seen them point out things like that, value in a vendor's business case and roadmap before. How do you see a roadmap in general playing into a customer's success with MDM, Bill?
Great question there. And there's actually a question that one of the attendees asked that kind of folds into this, that says, isn't there always a small leap of faith, and isn't everything risky? Does the business expect too many assurances from technology people that they're going to be successful? And I would say no. I'm an analyst. Former analyst. I get paid to have opinions. I would say no. We don't ask for too many assurances. One of the things that the road mapping exercise does, and we do it really well, is removes as much subjectivity from the discussion as possible. You want to convert the subjective into the objective, right? You want everybody to be able to look at a series of steps and say, we can absolutely do this. Unless, again, I always throw the phrase in, all else being equal. I'm willing to state that there are risks that are unknown. There are external forces if we get acquired while we're trying to do this as an implementer, that kind of thing. You don't know what you don't know. But if you remove that from the equation, I believe there's absolutely no reason you can't pretty much provide virtually 100% assurance that this series of events can take place and provide the value that we as a team say that we're going to provide, right? There's no reason for that. Again, it may seem radical to some people, but I've been doing this for a long time. And the people that are really successful and transformational were able to do that. They literally got everybody to agree. And that agreement is paramount. If everybody agrees, they're going to pitch in and do what they need to do as a stakeholder. And that's what I want to go back to the negative for a second and say, the other problem with pushing off value is, that value that you're pushing off is attached to stakeholders. And you might get initial buy-in. If they don't get whatever their value prop was, you're going to lose them, right? And so there are ancillary risks to even taking this approach of saying, I'm going to give up things. Or even push them off, right? I mean, we've seen that in our careers. You lose that momentum after a while. If somebody buys in and then they don't see the solution to their problem pretty soon, and if you tell them it's not, we do sub 3 months, but if you tell someone you're second in line, it's going to be 6 or 9 months, they'll usually live with that. But they have to get it in whatever time frame you said you would provide it, and I think that's doable.
I agree. And I think that is one of the great things about the roadmap, sets expectations. The other thing is that incremental value that you mentioned, people just need to understand it, but you do need to show it on the way. In my opinion, what I've seen out in the market is the day of 3-year projects is over, because businesses change so much in that time period. People also lose momentum, they lose focus on it, they lose energy. You've got to have that incremental success, and people have to understand the expectations.
Absolutely.
Which is huge. On the question of vendor assurances, I can tell you, from Profisee's perspective, we believe that we've got the best master data management software on the planet. But that alone doesn't make our customers successful. You need a few things in there. You do need a great software product, no doubt about that, because things fall apart without it. But you have to have the knowledge to know how things fit together and what's going to help you be most successful as a customer.
Right. And
for the vendor to have the courage to say that and to help you along the way. And then probably the most important thing is the customer itself and the people that are on that project, and the processes, the requirements that they've put together, the buy-in that you have gotten as a customer from your constituents to make it successful. It's not just about the software, and any vendor that tries to just give you assurances, they can give you assurances that their software works, I hope. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt there. But there's a lot of things that go into this, and what we realize that. And we really believe we help our customers do that. One of the other things I will cite that I think are really important is not just being able to implement quickly, but being able to take the next step. And Gartner did point out in the report that Profisee had more multi-domain implementations with additional business use cases after the first implementation than the other vendors. So That's one of the things that we bring to the table. And this whole roadmap is so important because it helps keep you on track. It helps you measure the value that you said you would get and continue along your path. And we could, Bill and I could probably talk forever about business cases and the key to the success, but we only have a certain amount of time. One comment you made before, Bill, where you said you used to get paid for your opinion, you still get paid for your opinions. So we value that tremendously. So let's talk a little bit about, from a buyer's perspective, and maybe along the lines of, buyer beware. One of the things, Bill, that I found interesting in this year's report was the encroachment of adjacent software market participants into the MDM space. What's your take on CDPs and augmented data catalogs, things like that are kind of morphing into the MDM space?
So it's a great question. We could spend a whole hour just talking about that, but we won't, obviously. And I've talked to a lot of industry analysts about this because there's a general trend towards sort of generalized data management as a concept, as opposed to the individual things that do it. And MDM is very well positioned to sort of move up into that because it keeps all of those dozen or so capabilities, as Gartner outlines them, in a single product, as you know, and integrated into a single thing in the platforms that are very good. So there's a bigger thing here, and it's been going on for decades. This is just the latest version of it. Is, MDM solves an enterprise level problem. It solves a shareability problem, a publishing problem, a cleanup problem, all of that, and a transformation problem, a digital transformation problem. This is the data you'll need to put all these new digitized processes in place, if that's in fact what you want to do, which most do now. But when that happens, when something gets a lot of critical mass and belief as a solution that this is what we need to do, you will get, and I've seen this for going on a decade, you'll get sort of ancillary markets beginning to say they do those things. I went through this earlier in my Gartner career with, believe it or not, archiving software saying they did data governance because they governed the archival cycle of physical data. And I used to have to go and talk to clients and say, that's not what we mean when we say data governance. We mean fit for purpose and accurate and complete and all of that stuff. So this is sort of a little more of the same, but more subtle than that. So things like CDPs, I would put it out there, even though CDPs are called platforms, they're really applications, right? So that's sort of a misnomer right there. They're really meant to source marketing data and then do things like campaign management. And the reason it's critical to understand that difference, as opposed to managing enterprise master data, and the reason it's critical to understand that is that the data quality and integration requirements for that are fairly minimal. If you give, I know Reed's sitting there. If you give Reed and company 65 or 70% quality data, they're going to be really happy for most of their use cases, because if they mistarget somebody in a campaign, so what? That kind of thing. So that's just one example. That's what a CDP is built to do. The connectors that come with them generally talk to marketing, business apps, and the downstream stuff is built inside the app to do those campaigns. So why is that a concern? Because that's all they do. Again, if you think you're going to start building connectors to every single data source in your organization that has master data that you need, if you think you're going to deduplicate it down to the level where you got a golden record, and if you think you're going to be able to send it wherever it needs to go or let it be called to wherever it needs to go, you're going to find out that none of that is there. And if you really needed to solve that problem, you're going to have to go back to the market and buy MDM software, because that's the thing you really needed in the first place. CDPs are one example of that. Another one is trying to use, and this is more familiar to everybody probably, trying to use an ERP or a CRM as your master for something. So CRM for customer, ERP for product. If you put a 30-page procedures document next to the user that says don't enter duplicate data and all the instructions on how not to do that, they might abide by it and you might get decent data at some point. But no one wants to operate like that. You want to be automated and integrated and all of that. And again, that's what MDM brings to the table. So there's that. And the last version of this, and I'm going to get a little technical here, is those pieces of software that actually call themselves MDM when it's convenient, and do have a lot of the functions, and they'll even say they're more modern. In fact, CDPs do this too. I shouldn't let them off the hook. Some of them, they use these more modern, quote unquote, NoSQL databases. And that's great. It costs the vendor less money, so they make more when they do a free trial and then, sell you the software later, that kind of thing. And we know there's no such thing as really free. But those mechanisms don't always have the transactional integrity of a relational database. And one of the things I used to say as an analyst is, look, there's a reason all the leading MDM vendors still use relational databases, because they can guarantee if a steward does an update that everybody else will see it pretty much immediately. And at least in theory, a lot of these newer, more modern databases don't do that. That's why Amazon can service your transactions so quickly, is because they're not making sure your address is correct everywhere right away. So these databases generally sacrifice what's called consistency to make the data more available. So we used to call this dirty read, back in the old days. DB2, for example, and Oracle would let you do a dirty read. Give me the closest piece of data that I'm asking for and don't make sure that any updates have been applied. That's the default of a lot of these more modern data persistence mechanisms that these things use. So the advice I always give is ask whatever vendor you're looking at for anything. And I'll boil this down to 2 points. Ask whatever vendor you're looking at for everything to talk to you about how they store data, and how do they ensure transactional integrity? How do they ensure that all updates will be available immediately to any user or system? And then how much is that going to cost down the road to ensure that that's happening? It was some sort of ancillary process and all of that. So again, if you need operational MDM in particular, transactional MDM, you're going to want that assurance. And you should always ask for it, because these things don't get volunteered generally, right? So everybody's great at everything until you ask the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned operational and analytical MDM. Have you seen a shift in the market? You've been in the MDM space, a long time, Bill, and you've seen a lot of change. Have you seen some shifts or acceleration of shifts, analytical versus operational? And maybe just, I don't want to make any assumptions, maybe just quickly state
Sure.
the difference between the two for anybody that might not be.
So analytical MDM is basically the sourcing of master data for downstream data warehousing. And it corresponds to what we call the consolidation style of MDM, which is conspicuous by what it doesn't do, which means it doesn't send any corrected data back up to the source systems to be synchronized. It just keeps sending them downstream to the data warehouse. So that's a powerful use case. But MDM, as I've always said, really comes into its own on the operational side, where you have people accessing whether read-only or read-write, and usually read-only at first and then read-write, some or all of their operational systems to synchronize them in real time. And that gives them that real digital transformation, right? That's really what digital transformation infrastructure is that sort of fully integrated master data across all your processes that matter, that are critical. So, that's where all those capabilities, those 12 capabilities, come out of the box and being integrated really pay off. You can certainly pay off just doing analytical MDM, but I would dare say if you're not moving past the consolidation style into what we call coexistence or centralized, I would ask, are you really getting full value out of this investment? And are you really transforming yourself, or is this just about cleaning up data, which is fine? That should just be a conscious, objective decision. It shouldn't be, well, I just didn't think of anything else. And part of our job is to say, did you think about all this other stuff? And I'll close by saying it's very gratifying, because most of the new clients and prospects that are coming to us, they get this. They say, yeah, we're going to clean up our reporting data first, but they'll immediately say, but as soon as that data is trusted, I want to do a real-time integration with Salesforce, read-write, or I want to do a real-time integration with Dynamics 365 or SAP S4. I definitely want to do that. I get that I shouldn't stay with that analytical side of things only. So it's unsolicited, which is important. They're coming to us understanding that, which is great.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bill. I have some other questions, but I know we started this talking about the Gartner study. So maybe I'll see if Reed, have we gotten any questions from the audience that might be appropriate? or inappropriate that might be something you want to share?
Yeah, so Bill. Yeah, so Bill, you were talking about implementation styles when you said coexistence, and there's a question about them. So the question is, out of the 4 MDM Hub implementation styles as defined by Gartner, which style do you think most organizations should favor or place more importance over when implementing in the cloud?
I'm going to turn that question 90 degrees and answer it, because it's an aspect of cloud that's more important, whether you're on-premise or in the cloud or in a hybrid environment, right? It's what are your data integration requirements going to be, right? So if everything's going to be in the cloud, which clouds are they going to be in? Is it multiple clouds? Is it a single cloud? You really want to think about, because it's possible to build something that goes across your firewall. I used to say this in a lot of research, that MDM is sort of the last thing that's moving into the cloud, and it's following slowly business applications that it needs to be integrated with. I had clients as an analyst, dozens and dozens, that the only thing they had on premise eventually was MDM. And it served sort of double duty as their integration hub between all their clouds, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But they all needed plans to figure out how this was going to work when they finally made the decision to get rid of all their infrastructure and move MDM to the cloud. So again, it wasn't so much the style, although if you're going to stay in consolidation style, this is probably less of an issue, because the data is only moving in one direction, probably from one source to one target, from the MDM hub to a couple of data warehouses, maybe data marts. The minute you go past that to coexistence or centralized, you really need an integration strategy that's real, because there's a big affinity between those two in real time. It's not an academic dependence, but it usually happens that if you're thinking about that, there are real-time use cases and business cases involved. That's when you have to start thinking about, not just cloud or on-premise, but what clouds. And it's possible to be fragmented all on-premise, and it's possible to be fragmented all in the cloud. So the general answer, I would say, just to give the most benefit to the most people on the call, is, think about how this is going to have to be integrated now and in the future.
Do you find, Bill, that sometimes there is a more common order of implementation styles that are used? Is there more frequently a certain chronological order that some companies favor?
So usually it starts with, registry used to be a common style. I don't spend a lot of time on that because it's really limited as a standalone style to healthcare now. But consolidation style is generally great if you've never done this before, or for B2C customer data that you're never really going to get control of the entry of. We get it from a bunch of systems. They're not going to let us change those systems because they're too high volume. So we're going to start there, and we're going to move. Then we'll decide to maintain. And my first implementation 20 years ago went this way. We're going to decide the first thing was postal address. We're going to let people inside the firewall maintain postal address, and then publish the postal address back out to all the systems, so everybody gets the mail they're supposed to get. That's how long ago it was. People were still mailing things to people. And then, we move from coexistence to centralized in a domain so that all the things, all the master data elements could be maintained there. That's pretty typical. There's another one that usually involves product data, where you start off centralized. They don't have anything that manages this data today. And they just want a system that gets a hold of all the data and cleans it up. And then they put a UI in front of it, and that's the place the data gets maintained. Everything else is downstream. So it's, in a way, they start centralized and move to coexistence as they integrate other things, like the graphic system for sales collateral gets integrated to MDM at a certain point. But that happens later. At first, they just want to get control of everything. So those are the two scenarios that are pretty common. There are others, and it does, like we tell everybody every day, let's do the business case and figure out how it, and again, I should have led off with this. Let's figure out how that translates into what styles are necessary. Because I said this to a bunch of clients yesterday, you can have different styles per domain. You can be consolidated for customer and centralized for product, or vice versa. And you can move from one domain to the next, as you asked, over time, or one style within a domain over time. So these are not things you have to decide and then stick with for years. It's a roadmap, to not to overuse the word. So that's the key thing, is map it to the business case. Why are you moving to coexistence style? What
Right.
is the use case that's going to service, and how valuable is it?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And you and I are in such agreement around, MDM being as much of a process as it is a technology. So I've got a ton of questions I could want to ask you, but again, all the people out there that invested their time, I want to make sure to see if we have other questions, Reed, to make sure that the people that join the call get the kind of questions answered they would like. Reed?
Yeah, of course, yes. So Bill, a question from one of our attendees here. So during the data load process, is it better to load directly your systems to an MDM and doing the cleaning and dedupes, or is it better to load from source systems to the data warehouse and then to MDM? What are the pros and cons, Bill?
So the smart guy answer is whatever works best, but there are patterns, right? So generally, and again, I'm going to assume that IT has a grip on this. They've got business agreement. They're going to solve the enterprise MDM problem, right? So if they're going to do that, what they're going to end up with is some set of hubs that, again, I'll get a little geeky here, is third normal form, optimized for transactional access. And one of the things they're probably going to do with that first is retire a bunch of ETL code and populate subject areas of A or the data warehouses with that new data, and maybe even go from batch to real time in that process to lower the latency, right? So, that's a typical pattern. We have had clients actually in the situation you described where they've got a data warehouse and they're pretty happy with the data quality. They want to know if they need to do it again for MDM. And the answer is you don't need to. MDM can source from a data warehouse as easily as it can source from anything else, particularly Profisee can with our services layer. The issue is optimization. So data warehouses are usually dimensional models of some type or another. I don't want to get religious about that. But for whatever reason, organizations still don't like to access those on a transactional basis, even read-only. So certainly that's a possible scenario. You could source from a data warehouse. I believe we may even have a couple of clients in a transitional state that are doing that. But even they are interested in reversing the polarity, if you will, eventually, because they want to use that third normal form hub to be accessed through a services bus to buy everything, not just the data warehouse. And they really don't want all those systems going after their data warehouse. So it's not that the data is not clean or that MDM might even do a better job. It's just better situated architecturally to service all those different use cases maybe than the data warehouse is. You could end up slowing down reports or queries. Still today that remains an issue in many cases.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bill. We got a bunch of great questions here. I'm going to come back to a great question on governance because I want to treat these as consistent threads. So one of the people asked, would Profisee be would be a totally MDM transactional solution? And that's a question. And then the follow-up is, what about latency? How impactful is that on the implementations?
So I'll answer that in sort of a general way. Yes, we do all styles of MDM and pretty much every use case for MDM. And we've got some great edge use cases. We support cancer research and all kinds of other things that are sort of on the fringe, the good fringe. So there's really not an issue there. Latency, I am not aware of any current issues. We've got a very modern piece of software on our hands that really isn't very old. Profisee goes back a ways with Microsoft, and for those that don't know, Profisee's predecessor built Microsoft Master Data Services, and Profisee, as of 3 or 4 years ago, is no longer based on Master Data Services. So it's really a very young piece of software. And we've got a REST API and all of that now. So without getting into specific use cases, I will say this, just in the interest of full transparency, like every other MDM platform out there, we are model agnostic. So we assume that either the implementer or us will knows how to, we know how to do data modeling. But I can tell you as an analyst, when platforms struggle, it was usually bad data modeling. And with great flexibility comes great responsibility. You either have to know how to do it or ask for help to build an efficient data model. But all of the ancillary stuff that we build around that and that comes out of the box around it works just great in terms of latency and performance.
Excellent.
But again, there is some responsibility on the implementer to build a performing data structure, and we help with that, obviously.
Absolutely. Which is another good thing about doing a roadmap, understanding where you want it going next. So this way you architect, put together a model that's going to help you down the road as well.
And getting a good partner if you need one, right?
Absolutely. We've got another question that came up around the conversation of operational versus analytical MDM. And the question was, gosh, don't we really need operational MDM? Isn't that something we have to look for? Isn't analytical MDM just a temporary stage?
If you're thinking properly, I would say it is. I applaud that sentiment because I agree with it. I'll go back to, I won't name him, but a very, very smart guy who's on our board of directors. When he first joined us, I was explaining all this stuff to him, and he actually said something to me about operational MDM, sort of like, why does this even have a name? It should just be something that people do. This is common sense. You're not going to be able to digitally transform without it. Why does this have its own name? And why isn't everyone doing it? And the answer is because it's challenging, right? But again, I agree with the sentiment. I think analytical MDM is valuable. I think it's great in terms of, I used to have a slide at Gartner that talked about the benefits of doing that first. You test out your data model back to the latency question, right? You test out your data model for performance, you test out the software, you test out the hardware it's on. Let's say you're on premise or even in the cloud, you test out the resources you've devoted to it to make sure that it's doing what you want it to do. You test out the DQ to make sure your data is 100%. It probably is, but you want to test it out before you take that fairly big step organizationally of connecting this database to your business systems. One of the scary statements is, and when I first did this, there was no going back. Our CEO at the time asked us, what's your back out plan? And we all just kind of stared at him because it was physically impossible to back out once we hooked up to the onboarding systems for customers. So again, I agree wholeheartedly, but I would just give the advice that analytical MDM it should be a temporary step, but it's a good temporary step to prove out a lot of things before you take that big step. And again, if you're looking at somebody like Profisee, you're not talking about years. This is weeks and months to get to that. So, but again, I think it's important to try to put up everything and then just put that sort of additional access to it once you're happy with it, right?
Yep, absolutely. And also, it could not just be viewed as a temporary; it could be viewed as one of the first steps. And you might still keep doing your analytical MDM use cases while you move on to the next operational. Right.
And this goes back to the lower price points as well. Years ago, I would hear this all the time. Many years ago, yeah, we did analytical. We were supposed to go to operational, and we ran out of money. And we just never went back. It's a big sell to do that. And if they had had a business case, they would have been able to do it. But that was a story I would hear frequently 8, 9, 10 years ago. Was we built this thing and it was supposed to do more, but other stuff came up. Yeah.
And there's no question. Operational MDM is where you can really, really get some impactful return on investment and performance and abilities and agility to serve your customers, right? As we look at business transformation, which we'll hopefully also get to, you've got to be able to react to customers so quickly, and having operational MDM systems can provide a tremendous amount of value. And hopefully we'll have some time to come back to that. But I do want to, go on to another topic that was brought up around data governance. Data governance has obviously become more and more popular, every year. And I'll quote the question verbatim. It says, Gartner lists data governance as a key functional capability for MDM solutions. What would you say to a client that is worried that they are going to have to buy an MDM solution as well as a data governance solution to run an MDM program and leverage governance components? In other words, I have to make an investment in 2 new software solutions.
So I'll say two things to that. One, very quickly, if you look at the weighting of that capability in their weighting matrix, it's 5% of the total. So they do name it, but it doesn't carry a lot of weight in the critical capabilities weightings that they have. And that goes all the way back to when I was there. Mostly because there are separate tools that do this and only do this, and they should be looked at separately. And should MDM vendors be held responsible for all of that functionality? Probably not. Maybe some of it, and that's what I'll talk about now. So if it's actually a pretty easy thing, especially with Profisee, and we have templates to help with this. If you make the leap mentally as an organization, architecturally, that metadata has the same physical characteristics as master data. So it's slowly changing, it's widely shared. Again, not very volatile usually. Some of it can be, but most of the traditional metadata is not. You could make the leap and say, metadata is a master data domain. I'm just going to treat it that way and load it into my MDM software. And immediately, most of those, if not all of those dozen capabilities, take on a little bit different cast. So stewardship becomes your way of maintaining a data catalog in addition to the actual master data. So the catalog data, the metadata that describes the data, can actually be treated like master data in a platform like Profisee. And if you think about all the other capabilities that come up, they all apply. You might not get all the bells and whistles that you get with a standalone data governance solution, but I'll tell you what, and this is true, in the last 12 months, we've made a bunch of sales to people that figured out they didn't have to buy 2 pieces of software when they made that leap. They were able to build a catalog, they were able to maintain it. And by the way, just to be clear, that metadata doesn't just have to describe master data. Obviously, we actually manage the master data. We won't manage the data that is described outside of that, but it can be described in that catalog that gets built and maintained inside MDM. So again, do you have to buy 2? I'll say this just from a practical standpoint. Usually, if not always, I'm trying to think of one that didn't say this. When we show this to a client or prospect that's asking if they need to buy a separate data governance solution, we show them the capabilities that arise when you put metadata as a master data domain in Profisee. The reaction is just about always, and I can't think of an exception, that's all I was really thinking about when I said governance. What else is there? And we don't want to answer because, there's other cool stuff, not all of which works really well, like discovery, which doesn't work really well most of the time because the data is not good going in. But
absolutely. And I've seen with existing customers that were thinking, okay, we're going to buy MDM first because the most important thing is I need to be able to enforce the things I know need to be done versus document them. And then have said, wow, I just realized after buying the software, I don't need a data governance. But let me ask you this, Bill, because there are times, I'm guessing, where you would want to buy just the data governance. So when would you say, if you were, consulting a customer, should they look at some data governance tool that maybe falls outside of MDM?
So I'll use as an example our largest partner, Microsoft, right? So Purview just got released. I think it may still be in beta, but I'm not 100% sure. I went to an awesome product launch for it, and we're integrating with them at the highest levels. We have a great partnership with them, as you could probably expect, with shared DNA and all of that. And we're really the only MDM platform built in their technology at all. So. Again, that only reinforces the relationship. But if you look at Purview, what they've been able to do, and if I were all the other vendors in that space, the data governance pure space, I'd be nervous because Purview does pretty much everything pretty well, and I'm sure they're going to get a lot of penetration with it. The thing that those things do, including Purview, and they don't all do this, but again, where I would go back to is that sort of crawling and discovery thing. Most people don't have a metadata environment that makes everything discoverable, because if they did, my wisecrack as an old implementer was, look, if my data was that good, I wouldn't need you in the first place to discover it for me. But nobody's is, and that affects the ability of these tools. Now, if you accept that and realize you're going to get 50% of the answer in an automated way and still have to do the other 50%, these tools are awesome. But that's where I would do it. To answer the question is, if someone says, look, I've just got a huge complex of data and metadata, no human being could ever get a hold of this, or I've got just some huge proposal out there to inventory all my data, which will cost more money than I'm ever going to have just to do the inventory. that's when I would actually go out and say, take a look at these discovery capabilities and, try to get a trial or something going and just see what it would do. Because most of them, would let you do that. Just see what the initial results would look like without any ability to act on them, right? That's where I think the differentiator is that discovery capability.
Perfect, Bill. Because we all know here at Profisee, we don't do everything. And one of the values that we do believe we bring, which is why we hire people like you, is bringing that intellectual property to the table and saying, hey, listen, we're not great for this, or in this particular situation, here's our recommendation, because we only want to earn the business if we can make it successful. I want to see if I can squeeze 2 more questions in, Bill, because we have a lot. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. Thank you so much, everybody in the audience, for asking such wonderfully insightful questions. So staying on the track of a topic at a time with data governance, there's a question that says, should data governance be an enterprise-level governance, or can it be several governance bodies for each domain, such as client, product, reference data, et cetera?
So the broad answer, and I'll then nuance it a little bit, the broad answer is the closer you can get, and people don't like to answer this question, but I will, the more you can centralize something like this, the more it pays off. The more you fragment it, the more it looks like what you're doing right now. Having said that, the way you can, and I just wrote an article about this that I hope is going to be published pretty soon. I wrote it this week, actually, is the thing about that business case and roadmap, it shouldn't just apply to implementing MDM. You can actually, the dirty secret of that process is that it can apply to buying a lawnmower or implementing data governance. So that's the idea, is go by use case. What are the data elements that you need to provide that initial value over the next 3 or 6 months? And then what is it going to take to govern those as centrally as possible, right? So, and then you work out from that. Just the same way your data model is expanding into other domains, your governance is now expanding. You're getting new stewards from different parts of the company. But the more they are sort of, I hate to use this word, but the more they're forced to communicate with each other in a bi-monthly meeting or whatever it is, the more value this adds. The more you let them stay apart, the more it looks like what's going on now. And people use the word silo too much. It's very easy to create more silos if you don't have this sort of overarching mission.
That's a great point, Bill. And I'm going to hop to another topic, but it's interesting because people talk about as an example. I think we try to think of these domains as siloed too often as humans. Like, for example, customer 360. Oh, I need the customer domain. Well, in today's world, if I want to be able to really get a complete view of that customer, I need product data. Which products have they purchased? What other products are out there that they might need to purchase? How many different locations is this same customer in? So one of the things that we really focus on, and why we built this product as a multi-domain product from the ground up, is the founders had that vision that these things all do come together. And just to say one customer domain is all you need to get a customer 360 probably isn't dead on. But let me move on, because there's another great question that came in here. There's so many good ones. This is back when we were talking about the business, Bill. And the question said, so is what you're saying is that change must come from the business? MDM implementations, do they need to come from the business? How much time do you spend training the business and understanding what is MDM so they can really understand why they need it? Because I think this is where, the business roadmap could certainly come into play, that I know you've been a big proponent of.
Yeah. So nothing is 100% absolute when it comes to this, but I divide this concept into sort of a quadrant style thing that says, think about things that save money versus things that make money, but also think about things you do badly now, but you do them, and things that you don't do at all. And where the digital transformation comes in that really pays off are things you don't do at all that would make new revenue, right? You're not going to get to that without the business participating and supporting you. I'll speak as a former IT architect that did MDM. The reason I like that quadrant style thing is that's the upper right. The lower left is fixing things we do now to make them better to save money. Any good IT architect can do that by themselves. They know what the process problems are currently. They know what doesn't work right, and they could fix them. the issue with that is that's not the full payoff of MDM. The full payoff of MDM is when you get the business involved and say, what is it you want to do that you can't do? This is so critical. The hardest conversations I had as an analyst was when an IT person would say to me, my business people are not that entrepreneurial. They're not going to have that conversation with me. Maybe they're a couple of years from retirement, maybe they're comfortable. But so what do it's so important that I would say either go out and get some business consulting help with people that have worked with your competitors to scare these people into doing something, or work on your resume, because that's how important that is. You're not going to get anywhere in terms of digital transformation if there isn't this pent-up demand from the business, even if it has to be created.
Yeah, the last comment, because we're right at the top of the hour here, that I'll just throw in and completely agree with everything you said, Bill. You know, as far as having to train the business on what MDM is, I don't personally think you need to do that, but what you do need to do is show them how the business problem they're trying to solve is linked to MDM. That's what you need to show them. How can they get the result or resolve the problem they have? They don't have to understand all the underpinnings of MDM, and it's one of the challenges that we've seen out in the market of why I think this MDM market isn't even 10 times as big, and it's already huge. And that's why, quite frankly, we started the whole Business Impact Roadmap program, was to help IT be able to articulate to the business, here's how MDM is going to help you, not just give you a spreadsheet that tells you we're going to increase your inventory turns to improve profitability. They know that. They know if they can increase inventory turns, they're going to make more money. They get that. What they need to understand is how having a much better, more accurate view of your inventory through MDM will get you to that point. So Reed, I know we're about 45 seconds over. Let me flip it back to you.
All right. Well, I think we're wrapping up here. Thank you guys very much for taking time out of your day to talk to us about the trends of MDM this year. Folks, you will be receiving an email from Profisee with the on-demand recording and a few other resource links. We, again, appreciate your time and participation today. It was a great discussion. So without further ado, have a great day, everybody. And
hey, Reed, I did want to say one thing. I'm so sorry. You know, I joked with Bill about how he's still getting paid for opinions. Well, he still is. So there are so many more questions we weren't able to get to. Even if you're not looking to buy MDM tomorrow, you know, we just look to spread out the word about the value of it and help people understand it. So feel free to reach out to us. Even if you just want to ask Bill a couple questions one-on-one, we're happy to do that. Thank you again for investing your valuable time. Reed, and your whole group, thank you for putting this event together and making it possible for us to interact with these great prospective companies. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Both.